Hey guys, I'm your host Tara A. Devlin, and welcome to another episode of Kowabana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. Have you picked up your copy of Sumikowa, The Haunting of Higanbana Heights yet? It's available now on Amazon and features 12 different stories all loosely based on Japanese urban legends, ghost stories, and creepypastas. So if you're looking for even more stuff to make your skin crawl and keep you thinking, go check it out. And on that note, this week we're looking at various stories that touch upon the supernatural. Stories that don't appear to have any logical explanation. This first one may conjure up images of Silent Hill or Siren, as it did for me, and it even takes its title from the latter. A group of high school boys are dared to visit an abandoned hospital deep in the mountains, but they're warned to leave before midnight. If they don't, well, find out what happens in Siren. This story takes place in the countryside where I live. I live in a countryside village surrounded by mountains, where at 9, 12, and 6 o'clock every day, the fire station blares a siren that's supposed to signify the time. Those who live in the city probably won't understand it, but for people like me who were born and grew up there, it was a normal, everyday occurrence. When I became a high school student, there were no arcades or karaoke places to go and have fun. All we had were mountains, rivers, and a dam located on the outskirts of the village. Yet, even in our embarrassing little village, we had a place that everyone thought of as a terrifying ghost spot. It was the old Imperial Army Hospital, and according to the rumors, it was a terrifying place to be. To reach it, you had to pass through a blocked mountain trail that only the locals knew of, and then ride through the mountains on a bike for about 2 hours to find it. This rough gravel road was only wide enough to fit a single car, so most people would see it and think, a dead end. I heard from my parents that it was an abandoned hospital, but nobody really thought they would build a hospital all the way out there. No, us kids called it the Secret Experiment Facility instead. If you build a place like that in the countryside, then people are going to wonder about it. And for us, we used it as a test of courage. If you hadn't been there before, then you weren't really a man. When I was in the first grade of high school, I was baptized by one of the senior students. Apparently, it was a rule to keep the location of that place secret until people reached high school age. You listening? Go there tonight, and then come back tomorrow, he said. And apparently, not just anyone was able to take part in this test of courage. Only myself, A, and B, kids who had been delinquents in junior high, had been chosen. There's no way the quiet kids could ever go through with it, was their response. That night we set out with a black pen we'd received from the older guys, a crudely drawn map, and a torch from home, sneaking out and taking our bikes to find the secret experiment facility. The following instructions were written on the note. Leave at 9 p.m. Arrive at 11:30. Write your name on the sign with the pen. Run away as fast as you can. The entire trip would take 5 hours by bike, at night, so we were somewhat annoyed, but also excited as well. We chatted as we pedaled up the dark mountain road. Do you really think it's there? B asked. It's the first I've heard of it, I said. If so, that's pretty scary, huh? If it's not, I'm gonna beat the crap out of them tomorrow, A said. At the time, we were more scared of the mountain road than we were of that place. We'd heard from the older guys that this facility was surrounded by barbed wire, a fence that stretched out far and wide around the place. Because it was impossible to get inside, once we'd written our names on the sign out the front, that was it. It was over. Because we didn't have to go inside, we honestly thought it would be an easy task and we weren't so worried about it. However, the fear of riding for 2.5 hours alone in the dark on a gravelly road in the mountains was a bit much. So to hide that fear, the three of us chatted. After we'd been riding for about 2 hours, the lights on our bikes suddenly shone on a large tree blocking the road. "Shit! Look out!" A screamed. "Hey, I didn't hear anything about this," B cried. "It must have fallen over in the typhoon last year," I suggested. We got off our bikes and decided to carry them over. First A, B, and then myself grabbed our bikes to climb over the huge tree. Then, "Ah!" I screamed. The moment I straddled the tree, something like white cloth moved on the ground beneath us. Surprised, I fell over with my bike. Hey, what are you doing?" A said. "What happened?" B chimed in. "Quit screwing around," I cried. Both A and B looked confused. "You guys just tried to scare me with that white sheet, didn't you?" "Huh?" they both said. They looked at me blankly as I raged. "Maybe you imagined it," they said, and without too much more thought, we all got back on our bikes and started riding again. After 2.5 hours of riding, we finally arrived, right on time. There was a 3-meter-high door covered in barbed wire to keep people from opening it. The barbed wire continued out left and right from it. We shone our lights into the distance, but it seemed to go on forever. "Shit, that's scary," B said. "Can we see the building inside?" I asked. "Oh, this is boring. Let's just finish this up and get out of here," A said. B and I both agreed it would be pointless to hang around, so we went to write our names on the sign with the marker. No entry appeared in large letters beneath our lights. "Wow, they're old letters," B said. "They're a little odd, huh?" "Hey, look over here," A said, pointing to something. There were countless names written on the board, all of the kids who had come before us. But amongst them was a strange scribble. "Get out of here before midnight." "Pfft, how stupid," A said. "What the hell is that?" Let's get out of here," I said. "The paper they gave us says to get out of here as soon as possible as well," B agreed. A quickly glanced at his watch. "Hey, it's only 10 more minutes till midnight. Let's wait." "No way, man. Let's go home." Well, if it's only 10 minutes, then... sure," I agreed. We outvoted B, so in the end, we agreed to wait. It was just about to hit midnight. A started the countdown. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Nothing happened, or so we thought. A loud siren rang from the secret experiment facility beyond the barbed wire fence. B and I panicked and jumped on our bikes to flee. "Hey, aren't you embarrassed with yourselves?" A called out after us. "Huh? What are you on about? Let's get out of here." "Don't run away. This is the punchline." "Huh?" The guys knew the siren would ring right as we were leaving. They did it to scare us. B and I said nothing. "We're better than that. Let's get our revenge on them." "Huh? How?" A smiled like it was a piece of cake. Let's go inside. A was bigger than us and acted like the leader. Of course, we were scared, but we couldn't go against him. I was hesitant, but I knew that A saw himself as a hero and he would look down on us as cowards if we didn't agree. So, we went along with it. B opposed until the bitter end, but because I went along with A's idea, he didn't want to remain outside alone and agreed to come as well. We started climbing over a section of the door that didn't have any barbed wire. Once we were all inside, we held a torch in hand and started walking. We continued walking along the path we'd just come from. Hey, we're not really going to go inside, are we? I asked. Huh? What are you saying? We're going to go in and write our names on the scariest part inside. I can't. I'm going to stay outside, B said. Then stay out there alone. We chatted as we walked, trying to kill our fear. Finally, we reached the building, the secret experiment facility. Hey, that's it, right? A said. What's it? What do you mean? All of a sudden, a building appeared in the dark forest surrounded by mountains. The electricity appeared to still be on, as lights were on around it. The light bulbs inside the building were on as well. It really does look like a hospital, I said. Now this is what I'm talking about, A smiled. Don't you think it's a bit strange? B said. A and I looked at him. Did you see any electricity lines on the way here? For a moment, A and I both froze. Maybe they have their own power, we suggested, trying to find some sort of explanation that made sense. And then, we approached the building. It was a plain 2-story building with no letters or signs on the outside. As we stood before the entrance, I realized something strange. The front door's open. It was like it was inviting us in. The front glass door was open. Hang on, B screamed before we stepped inside. What? Stop chickening out. Are you really gonna wait here? Hang on. B shone his light on the outside of the building again. Huh? The building was clean. Too clean. Like it had just been built a few years earlier. It was unbelievable for a building so deep in the mountains. B shone his torch up on the second floor. A nurse in white clothing with a pale face looked down at us. The moment our eyes met, she disappeared into the back. Ah! I screamed. What's wrong? What happened? Seemed I was the only one who saw her. You guys didn't see that? I trembled and tried to explain, but they didn't believe me. You're just saying that to keep us from going inside. Quit it. I can't do this anymore. Quit screwing around. Seemed the two of them had grown scared as well. At that very moment. The siren on top of the building rang again. It was so loud I feared my eardrums would burst. My ears! We ran into the building and slammed the door behind us, trying to escape the sound. The moment we went in, the siren outside stopped. What the hell was that? A said and tried to open the door. He jiggled the handle. Huh? He jiggled again. What the hell? He violently shook the handle and then started kicking it. B and I thought he was trying to scare us again, but it seemed the door really wouldn't open. We struggled to open the door to this hospital beneath the dim light. The moment I realized the situation we were in, It was like thousands of bugs were crawling all over my skin. Before long, we heard another noise, like something creaking. We turned towards it, and a wheelchair came rolling down the hall towards us out of the darkness. B and I screamed, but A instead screamed towards it. "Quit screwing around! Who is it? Is it you?" He was talking about the senior who had given us the orders to come here earlier that day. "You're not gonna scare us with this." A went towards the old chair and tried to kick it, but at that same moment, something forcefully lifted him into the air and then sat him down on it. "Hey, what the hell?" He turned to look at us. "Help me!" Before he could finish his sentence, the wheelchair flew back into the darkness with terrifying speed. We were so scared that for a few seconds, we couldn't move, nor could we scream. The moment we realized that this was reality, that had really happened, the paralysis that gripped us broke. Shit! Oh, let us out! Oh, let us out! B and I screamed and banged on the entrance door. Something creaked again. This time, 2 old wheelchairs appeared out of the darkness. We turned around. We saw them. We screamed. Our faces pale, we started pounding on the door again. The pale-faced nurse stood on the other side of the door, glaring at us. "Ah!" We screamed, and then passed out. When I came back to, B and I were being wheeled by nurses in the chairs. I turned to look at him, and he was staring at me, his face stiff. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. B seemed to be suffering from the same fate. A pale-faced nurse was pushing his chair. Another was probably doing the same to mine. B's chair was wheeled into the room first. Even looking at him from behind, I could see that his body jerked in fear for just a moment. Then my chair was pushed in behind him. Just like B, for a moment my body jerked. I was so scared I wet myself. It was the operating room. A was bound to the operating table, and they were dissecting him alive. When he saw us, he screamed, tears rolling down his cheeks. "Help me! Help me! I'm sorry! Forgive me! Ah!" Some men that looked like doctors stood around him, his stomach open like a frog as they removed organs one by one. B and I sat in our chairs watching him, crying. The doctors gave some order to the nurses pushing our chairs. Then we were taken away to a different location. The chairs creaked. It was a room like a prison cell. We were tied to a bed, and the nurses gave us a shot. Fear overwhelmed me as my consciousness started to fade, and then I passed out. Hey! Wake up! When I woke up, my seniors from high school were calling out to me, worried. I suddenly jumped up. I was in our only hospital out in the countryside. I looked over, and B was lying in the bed next to me. 2 days had passed since our test of courage. I asked the doctor what had happened and why I was there. He told me that the next day, our seniors grew worried when we didn't show up to school, so they told the teachers about the test of courage. That evening, they set out to look for us, and several teachers drove to the abandoned hospital by car. Apparently, they didn't come across that fallen tree we'd found in our way. They found our footprints past the barbed wire, so they followed them inside, and when they looked around, they found us, all sleeping in different rooms. I cried and told the doctor everything that had happened to us, but as he listened, he tilted his head. We refused to believe his story, so he drove us out to the abandoned hospital. When we saw it in the daylight, we were shocked. The entire building had been burnt down. It barely resembled a building and looked nothing like the clean building we'd seen that night. Nervously, we went inside and found the rooms where we'd been tied up, and the operating room A had been in. A's name was written on the top of the table. Apparently, when they found him, A had been screaming in pain, but no painkillers or sedatives worked, so they transferred him to the big hospital for proper testing. They couldn't find anything wrong with him, inside or out, so they thought it had to be mental and transferred him to a psychiatric hospital. We went to visit him numerous times after that, but he never returned to normal. Several months later, A lost his mind. He stopped saying things hurt and completely broke down, like a living doll. As for B and myself, our sleepless nights continued. Whenever the clock struck midnight, we could hear that siren blaring from the abandoned hospital. Like it was calling out to us, asking us to return. What was that place, and what happened there? The only records we could find was that it had once been an army hospital, and it had burnt down after the war. In this next story, a group of university students are bored and drunk and decide they want to head out for a little test of courage as well. There's a famous ghost spot nearby, so a few of them decide to head out and check it out during the dead of night. When they get there, however, they discover that they may not be alone. Find out what's going on in The Chanting Voices. This is a true story from when I was in university. My university was close to a famous suicide spot. A short distance into the woods there was a waterfall, which I'll call S Waterfall. Although it was famous as a suicide spot, the scenery was beautiful and it wasn't too far from the city, so lots of parents visited it with their children during the summer, and often went there to enjoy the cool air as well. One hot summer's night, myself and a few other club members were drinking at my place and enjoying some scary stories. Like a friend of a friend who could see ghosts. You know, the usual sort of stuff. Myself and another friend of mine, I'll call him Keita, were well versed in all sorts of things occult, so honestly, we were kinda bored. So suddenly he said, "Let's go visit S Waterfall." Myself and one of the ladies, I'll call her Eiko, were like, "Yeah, let's go," and got all excited. But nobody else seemed to want to go. It wasn't that they were scared, but that they were drunk and couldn't be bothered going outside again. We ended up splitting into two groups, those who would stay and drink, and those who wanted to go out. And the three of us went to visit the waterfall. "We'll bring you back a great story. Look forward to it," we said, and with a torch in hand, left the house. The waterfall was only a 30-minute walk away, but it was too much of a hassle, so we took a taxi. We got out in front of the forest and walked the rest of the way in. "Wow, it's so dark," Eiko muttered. We only had a single light, and the sky was cloudy, so there wasn't any moonlight either. How scary! The three of us jumped around as we walked through the forest. We only had the one torch, so Keita and Eiko used their phone lights to see as they walked. It was the first time I'd ever been there at night, but the path in was paved, so it was less scary than I thought. Right when I started to think that it was no big deal, I could hear the sound of the waterfall in the distance. A cool breeze blew through the humid air as well. Eiko suddenly let out a small scream. There were a bunch of Jizo statues lined up to the right in front of us. There were around 100 of them, all around the size of a kokeshi doll, and they were all smiling. Eiko had apparently been focusing on the ground with her light so much that when she saw them out the corner of her eye, they scared her. Come to think of it, these were here, huh? They weren't really remarkable during the daytime, but at night, seeing so many of them in the little light we had, they were definitely creepy. Now it finally feels like a test of courage, huh? As I moved to walk ahead, Keita suddenly grabbed my sleeve. He looked at me, worried. "What's wrong? You scared?" I tried to make fun of him, but Keita held a finger up to his lips and shushed me. "Can you hear something?" he said. "Hear something? Hear what?" Knowing him, I figured he was just trying to scare us, but he looked serious. Confused, Eiko and I fell silent and tried to focus on the sound. All I could hear was the waterfall. No. There was something else mixed in with it. A low sound. Yeah, I could definitely hear it. "Is that chanting?" Eiko whispered and looked to me for confirmation. It certainly sounded like chanting, like several people chanting together at once. A chill ran down my spine. "Come to think of it, I've heard something about this before," Keita whispered in a small voice. "About some religious group that's taken up residence near S Waterfall. Maybe it's for real." Hey, that was even scarier than some ghost story. "I don't feel very well," Eiko said in a small voice herself. "Let's go back, yeah?" Her face went pale, and she was trembling. I looked at Keita, and we both gave a small nod. We decided to leave. On the way back, we noticed Eiko was acting strange. She was in quite the rush. Despite saying that she felt sick, she was walking briskly, almost as though she was in a race. She almost left us behind. "Hey, Eiko!" Right as I tried to speak to her, she took off running at full speed. We had no idea what was going on, but both of us took off after her. She was so fast that we could barely catch her. We finally caught up to her at the edge of the forest. She was stooped over, bawling her eyes out. We were even more confused, so all we could do was stand by and watch her. When she was done and had finally calmed down, she started to tell us what had happened. "Back at those Jizo statues, when I heard the chanting, I turned to look through the trees and I saw people in white clothes. They were surrounding us. It wasn't just one or two people. There were dozens of them." "Are you for real?" Keita and I were at a loss for words. We certainly didn't want to hang around for our test of courage anymore. We wanted to get home as quickly as possible. As we went to stand up, we heard numerous chanting voices coming towards us from the path, as well as footsteps heading our way. The three of us silently screamed and ran as fast as we could. It was the scariest thing that's ever happened to me in my life. Whether they were the cult members or the spirits of those who had killed themselves there, I don't know. I don't want to know. And I don't ever want to go back there again, not even during the day. There are items all around the world that are said to be cursed. Owning one or even just touching one can be enough to curse you and even bring about death. And Japan doesn't lack in these stories either. This next one is about a chair. A certain chair in a certain classroom. But the problem is, nobody knows which chair it is. All they know is that if you end up being assigned it, it'll bring about your death. Find out why in The Chair That Kills. In England, there's a famous chair known as Busby's chair. There was a prisoner on death row named Busby, and it was his favourite chair. And it's said that whoever sits on it now will die. As the rumours spread, it said that more than 60 people tried their luck by sitting on the chair. They later died. There's a story similar to this in Japan as well. This happened to B-kun, a junior high student. There were rumours about a cursed chair at the school he went to. Long ago, there used to be a boy in that classroom who was bullied by the other students. It was said that on September 1st, the day of the school's opening ceremony, he used his own chair as a stool and tied a rope around the lights before hanging himself. After that, it was said that every year on September 1st, if you sat on that boy's chair, the chair he used to kill himself, you would be cursed as well. Considering the history of the chair, the school attempted to get rid of it, but several years later, a janitor who had no knowledge of what had happened removed both the desk and chair and put them back in one of the classrooms. Now, nobody knows which classroom they're in and which is the real cursed chair. The curse is like a game of Russian roulette. Up until present, the students who were sitting on that chair on September 1st found themselves the victims of accidents, madness, and apparently even suicide. If something bad ever happened during the second semester, people blamed it on sitting on that cursed chair. It became a school legend. Of course, B-kun had also heard about the cursed chair, so when it came time to switch seats at the end of the first semester, he was against it. This would mean their seats would change on September 1st. The students drew lots, and B-kun ended up in the middle of the classroom. He felt an indescribable unease. It was hard to put into words, but his shoulders felt heavy, and the air around that chair seemed different. He felt like he'd pulled it. Perhaps he'd gotten the cursed chair. The thought of sitting there was beyond painful. He wanted to stand up and change right away. He sweated profusely the entire lesson. Thankfully, the summer holidays soon began, and he didn't have to actually sit in that chair, but he was in no mood to enjoy the holidays. When they ended, and he returned to school on September 1st, he'd have to sit in that chair. It was all he could think of. Throughout the holidays, B-kun thought of all the different ways he could deal with the chair. And on September 1st, he arrived at school 2 hours before class began, well before anyone else. He thought to change his seat before anyone arrived. It meant someone else would become a victim, but that couldn't be avoided. He'd been driven into a corner. When he entered through the rear door, B-kun was shocked. He'd arrived at school 2 hours early, and yet there was somebody already in the class before him. A boy sitting in the middle of the room, in his chair. The cursed chair. A chill ran through his body. The boy didn't look like anybody from his class. Was he, perhaps? The boy's neck started to turn like a mechanical doll. It wasn't a movement a normal person could make. He wanted to close his eyes and run away, yet he was frozen on the spot and unable to turn his eyes away from the boy. Then, when the boy turned around, he saw his eyes. They were clear, like glass. That was as much as he remembered. When he came back to, people were chattering around him. The classroom had filled at some point with students returning from summer vacation. Many of them had tans from the holidays. Bikun had apparently fallen asleep in his chair. He gulped. He was sitting in the cursed chair. His legs trembled in fear. Why? He'd been so careful, so why? Bikun panicked and ran from the room. He flew past the shoeboxes without changing his shoes and ran to the red light in front of the school, running right through it as a truck drove through. Apparently, nobody knows which classroom that cursed chair is in now. And just like that chair, the mask in this next story is also said to be cursed. A young man's uncle enjoys collecting weird antiques, and when he comes across a certain mask in an old store, he has to have it. But then, things start to change, and his uncle starts behaving weirdly. Is it the mask's fault? Find out in Old Mask from the Antique Store. My friend's uncle likes collecting old things, so he likes traveling around various antique stores. He enjoys buying old furniture, vases, and all sorts of weird things. Whenever he goes over to visit his uncle's house, he gladly shows him all the junk that's piled up in his house over the years. And thanks to that, he's also gotten interested in old things. One day, his uncle told him that he had something he really wanted him to see. His uncle's house was only a 10-minute walk away, so he rushed over right away. "I found a bargain at the antique store today," he said. "This is an old mask that shamans once used in their curses." The mask appeared to be made from animal leather, and the moment he saw it, he felt sick. "This mask is creepy," he told his uncle. His uncle smiled and said, "Well, because it's a mask that shamans use to kill numerous people. This mask is so powerful that merely by possessing it, other evil spirits will stay far away, so it works as protection as well." The uncle was so proud of his find that he intended to make it a family heirloom. In complete contrast, the mask freaked out my friend so much that he left his uncle's house as soon as possible. A few days later, he suddenly ran into his uncle at the station and, for a moment, was confused. It was his usual uncle, but there was something about him that made him seem like an entirely different person. His uncle was on his way home, so they decided to return together, and as the two of them walked, a dog suddenly started barking wildly at them. "That's odd. That dog is always so calm," my friend said. "Nah, recently that dog's been really noisy. It's honestly annoying," his uncle replied. His uncle loved dogs, so to hear him speaking so hatefully towards one surprised him. Before long, all of the dogs in the neighborhood started to disappear. He couldn't get it off his mind, so my friend went to visit his uncle's house again. His uncle seemed to be out when he got there, and there was no response when he called out. He glanced up at the second-floor window, and for a moment he thought he saw something strange staring down at him. A chill ran down his spine that, even now, he says he still can't forget. He visited his uncle numerous times after that, but he was always out, and the neighbors said that they hadn't seen him in a long time either. A few days after that, his neighbors complained to the police that there was a strange smell coming from his uncle's house. They found piles of dog corpses, but his uncle was nowhere to be seen. My friend's father was his only blood relative, so he went over to the house and apparently the inside was full of dog remains. It looked like a picture of hell. For some reason, all of them had their organs removed. My friend spoke of the mask and they tried looking for it, but it was nowhere to be found. They haven't seen his uncle or the mask since that day. Perhaps it transported him to another world. Our last story for this week features a type of family curse. Nobody knows what it is, why it happens, or how to stop it. But once you see it, there's seemingly no way to escape it. What is it? Find out in Glaring. This is my friend's story. My friend, A, went back to his father's family home in the countryside alone once a year, whenever there were some long holidays. When he was in the second grade of junior high school, his grandfather had fallen ill several days earlier, and he said something to my friend and his aunt, his father's older sister. When I wake up during the night, I see people who have already died surrounding my bed and staring down at me. It's terrifying. They thought it was just bad dreams because of the cold, so they tried to console him. 5 days later, he got even worse, and then passed away. 2 years passed, and my friend started high school. Just before Obon, he returned to his father's family home shortly before his parents. That night, he returned from the convenience store, and at some time past 9 p.m., when his grandmother should have been asleep, he heard a noise coming from her room. "What's wrong, Grandma?" He peeked inside, and when his grandmother saw him, she grabbed him and started crying. "I saw your grandfather and others surrounding my bed, staring at me." Remembering what his grandfather had said 2 years earlier, he grew scared. "It's okay. It was just a dream," he said, trying to calm her down, and he stayed by her side until she fell asleep again. 3 weeks later, she died suddenly of a stroke. When he went back that same winter, he was playing with his cousin when he said, "Oh yeah, last night I had this really scary dream. Grandpa and Grandma and some other people were standing in my room, and they were all glaring at me." Thinking he was in trouble, A took his cousin to visit their ancestors' graves, and then they visited the temple where the monks said some prayers for him. 2 days later, his cousin died in a car accident. After that, A stopped going back to their family home other than New Year's and Obon. 5 years after his cousin died, he got a call from his aunt. "A-chan, do you remember when Grandpa, Grandma, and B-chan died? When their dead relatives were glaring at them?" Yes, that. I saw them too. A was speechless. I was scared, but I tried looking at them, and there were 9 in total. My mum and dad, B-chan, all of them were my relatives. But there was one person there I didn't know. A man in his 40s, wearing a suit. He looked rather skinny, but he was smiling, like grinning at me. Oh, he was creepy. Aunt, you should be careful, or... I know. Anyway, I'm gonna look into it and get myself purified. I'll also be careful not to get into an accident. Not that I can do much about a sudden illness though, huh? Anyway, you take care too. That was 2 months ago. He saw her again during Obon, but his aunt was as lively as ever. She didn't say anything about being purified, but maybe she went. And it worked. Don't forget to check out Sumikowa, The Haunting of Higanbana Heights, available on Amazon right now. You can also get even more Kowabana and other Japanese horror at our YouTube channel, youtube.com/KowabanaJapan, or on our Patreon at patreon.com/TaraADevlin. Stay safe, guys, and I'll see you again next time for even more Kowabana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. Want even more scary stories? Head over to kowabana.net for new translations every week. You can also join our Patreon for exclusive stories you won't find anywhere else. Head over to kowabana.net now.